Songwriters in the UK just secured a historic win. One of the champions behind this massive win is Helienne Lindvall. She's the president of the European Composer and Songwriter Alliance. She's former chair of the Ivors Novello Awards, former board director of the Ivors Academy, and chair of the Ivors Academy Songwriter Committee. And she's the woman behind the open letter that pressured record labels to start paying songwriters, with over 2,000 songwriters and artists that have signed on, including yours truly. So in this conversation, we're going to go behind the scenes with the Pay Songwriter campaign, and we're going to learn how Helienne and her allies and peers got to this win. Keep watching. For the people who haven't heard, what exactly did the UK songwriters just win, and why is it such a big deal?
So we managed to get the major labels to agree to cover expenses and pay a per diem of £75 when they book a songwriter or book an artist with a songwriter for a session. It's been a long, hard road, and it's definitely not over, but we'll dive into it.
All right, so what does this per diem mean in practice? Like who pays it? How much is it? Who qualifies for it?
The label pay it. It's not recoupable from the artist. The three major labels, two of the major labels, Warner and Universal, said that they will just pay £75 in per diem per session and cover expenses. And Sony they don't want to handle the admin. I don't know how. They're still going to have to handle some admin, I would imagine, but they're saying that, they'll pay money through to the Ivors Academy that will distribute it to the songwriters that are deserving. I'm still not 100% clear on how that's going to be working.
So the songwriters that are writing for a Sony artist would go to the Ivors for the per diem?
That's what it looks like at the moment.
Okay.
So yeah, it's a little bit confusing in that sense, and they didn't come voluntarily to the table with that. Well, I mean, I will give it to, like, as I will explain, like Warner had already kind of come to the table before this happened. So.
Okay, so how did this campaign start? What was the turning point that sparked it? Like take me back to the beginning.
We'll go back to 2018. That's how long
Yeah.
ago. I was chairing the Ivors Academy Songwriter Committee, and we were just all trying to come up with ways to kind of remedy the present situation we were in. And in particular, that when you go in to work with an artist, it's all on spec, and actually you end up losing money because I have to pay travel and you have to pay food and all that stuff. And so you're actually kind of investing in that artist with no guarantee whatsoever that that song will even come out. And sometimes you're even the A&R, in the sense you're developing the sound of that artist. So we came up with the idea of per diems, and we were kind of discussing that the idea for per diems were in particular because it covers expenses, so that we didn't want to have any confusion with it being a salary or a work for hire, because we don't want to risk not getting paid for copyright or owning our copyright. So anyway, the CEO then of the Ivors Academy said, well, the first thing we should do is to send it to the BPI, which is the umbrella organization for record labels. I wasn't too sure about it because I thought, actually, they're so far removed from the creative process, and their job is basically to be a buffer to the labels. And sure enough, the response that we got from our letter, which kind of outlined, the risks that we take. And our letter also asked for points on the master, by the way, a minimum of like 4 points to be distributed amongst the songwriters, and a minimum of £75 for per diems. They said labels take a risk too, blah, blah, blah. And it was like complete stonewalled. So then I was continuing talking with, in particular, songwriter managers, because a lot of the time they're the ones that are talking to the labels. So we decided, okay, let's do it on a kind of grassroots level, and let's talk to all the songwriter managers and some of the artists. And actually at that point, Ray and her manager came in on a meeting. We were discussing how to go about it. We wrote up a campaign that people could sign. Again, the same kind of ask as before. And we managed to get a lot of even artists supporting it, like Jess Glynn, who was really big at the time, and a lot of the biggest writers and writers in America as well, like Ross Golan signed it. You signed it. Like, yeah, a lot of American writers were on board as well. And it got a lot of coverage in a lot of the newspapers and the magazines. And around this time, on the Ivors tip, on the Ivors Academy tip, well, by now, the pandemic had kicked in. And suddenly artists weren't making any money from touring. So it was, in a way, easier to get everybody on board. Like, okay, we need to make more money from streaming because that's the only thing that we're really making money from. And so we got together with the musicians union, who also wanted to change things when it came to streaming. They wanted studio musicians to get paid for streaming, which they don't at the moment. And we figured the musicians union is actually a lot bigger than the Ivors Academy. They've got a lot more members. So we started a campaign together that we called Fix Streaming. I'm a really big fan of just saying what it is on the tin. That's why it's like Pay Songwriters. Let's not beat around the bush. And fix streaming. Nothing to kind of airy fairy. And this then got tens of thousands of signatures on top of what we had with Pay Songwriters, which then triggered a streaming inquiry during the pandemic. And the government said, okay, we need to do a proper inquiry and then set up working groups. One for transparency. That one, it took us ages to even find out who was on the transparency group, which was quite ironic. In the end, they got a code of practice, a code of conduct that, was okay. It didn't really reach everything that we wanted. There was a working group on metadata. That was probably the most successful one. And then finally, the last one of the bunch was the remuneration, and that was the toughest one. And meanwhile, a bunch of songwriters and producers here, including myself, we actually, spurred on by this guy, Owen Cutts, that had set up a WhatsApp group for producers. And he asked if I wanted to join. We had some of the songwriters who had been on the songwriter committee earlier when I was chairing it at the Ivors. And he was talking about per diems as well. And so we kind of went out and did a campaign for per diems at that point. This was about a year and a half ago or so. And at that point, because there were a lot of big writers and producers in the UK that was on that, we managed to actually get Warner to agree to pay per diems. It's kind of a lot of different roads, a lot of pressure from different sides. And of course, Ray, during this, she was always being very vocal in public whenever she got the chance. Her being vocal helped us explain and why she was saying these things, how things actually work in our industry. Finally, this summer, they needed to go back to the government, to this working group on remuneration. They needed to come up with something. And this is what they came up with, the result they came up with. So we still haven't achieved the points on the master. And in the meantime, what we have campaigned for with our WhatsApp working group, or WhatsApp producer and songwriter group, which is called Music Creators Collective, is also song fees. So that's what we're asking for. WhatsApp group has actually been really useful because we're sharing stories and supporting each other when we're asking for these things as songwriters and producers. The reason that we've gone this way initially is because changing the way the streaming revenue is distributed is very, very difficult for a lot of different reasons, in particular for the domination of major labels and major labels owning major publishers.
You speak in my language. This is why we're friends. This is why we're friends.
So we're just looking at what other ways how can we work around this. This is
Yeah.
because sitting waiting for these streaming deals to
To
change so that
change.
songwriters get more is
It's a
very
game that,
frustrating.
well, and I've had this conversation with plenty of like songwriter advocates, and there's some people that are like, we're playing the long game, and unfortunately everyone can't afford to play the long game. Like it, if we're gonna wait until the streaming rates are fixed in order to make some money from our music, I mean, like you said, this has been going on, this specific campaign has been going on since 2018. You were asking for per diem, a song fee, points, and you got the per diem with all these caveats. And so it's just like, I think
and
people just don't understand. Go ahead. What were you gonna say? Go ahead.
and the same rate that we asked for 7 years ago. What else it cost the same
It's
as
just,
it did 7 years ago?
right. It's
And
like, okay, so now
even
things need, yeah. So it needs to go up because cost of living is higher now since from 7 years ago when you guys first asked. Is that what you're saying?
yeah, expenses, because
Yeah.
it is supposed to cover expenses. It's not supposed to cover our rent, because that's
So
a different discussion.
expenses, travel, food, like that kind
Oh,
of stuff.
yeah, and I would say, and it's an interesting one about babysitters, because I think this is something that never ever really gets discussed. And I remember when I was talking to quite a big writer here in the UK, and said, that we had launched this Pay Songwriters campaign. Did he want to sign it and get on board? And he said, definitely. He said, this morning, yeah, I had booked a babysitter for my boy, and the artist called me up and said they were hungover and canceled the session. And I'm now out of pocket because I can't cancel the babysitter, the same day. And I thought about, it's a thing that not only is it to cover expenses, but it's also to value the songwriter, because we've come to a point where it's like, so we're kind of at the bottom of the food chain, while the song is more important than ever. And we think about, how has it gotten this way? And a lot of it is because of divide and conquer, and making songwriters feel like, if I put my foot down, they'll go to somebody else. And this is the power of working together and saying, no, you know, we all have to stand together. And I understand if you're new to the industry and you're trying to break in. I understand if you don't want to ask for a song fee, that you just want to get in the room. But in general, this is affecting not just people trying to get in the room. Like, we're losing a whole middle class of songwriters, because it's impossible to survive, and it's too costly to go into sessions. A lot of songwriters I know are getting more and more selective about going into sessions, because they spend so much money, and whereas it used to be during the physical, when we had physical records, even getting an album track would kind of sustain you, but now an album track won't even pay for a cup of coffee. I say as I drink a cup of coffee.
It's literally like an album cut means nothing now. And it's so interesting because I always argue with people about this. I'm like, so when an artist goes on tour, what do they tour? The album, the project. And on tour, the single. They tour their body of work. And like, for it to be that the only song that's now making money is the single versus it being like it was back then, where it was like, okay, you've got the single, it's on the radio, but you also have physical sales and like hard, like cash in hand, and I agree with you. It definitely is divide and conquer, and
It's
and
interesting what you're saying about that, about going on tour, because I remember years ago, and this was actually during the time when we were launching the Pay Songwriter. I remember reading an interview with this country artist called Kip Moore, and he said, this is in Billboard, he said that when he goes on tour, he pays all the writers that have written for his album, he pays them 3 to 5 grand each, whether he plays their songs or not. Because he said if they hadn't worked with him on the album, he wouldn't be touring. He said the reason why he did it, one of the reasons, apart from just being obviously a fair person, kind of realizing the importance of that, was that he had realized that writers were so focused on having the single now, even in Nashville, that it was not conducive to creativity and innovation and changing anything. It was just about almost kind of repeating what had already been done. And for songwriters to relax and experiment, he thought that was one of the ways to go about
it sounds crazy to say who wants an album cut, but who wants an album cut?
it.
And that's so messed up. There's this new show on Netflix called Hitmakers. It's like a whole bunch of songwriters and producers, and they're working on different artists or whatever. And there's this producer on there, and he was like, every time I go in the room, I'm there to make a hit. And it just made me think, could you imagine, like, there's like some of the greatest albums of all time if those creators were only focused on the single? I remember when I was still like in the studio working and stuff like that, and getting an album cut, your team's disappointed. It's not like you're not the only one that's pissed. Your publisher is like, damn. You know what I mean? Like everyone is like banking on that because that's the only record that makes money. It's tragic for real.
But even singles don't necessarily make
Don't
money
even make money
today.
now.
It's
Right.
like,
Right. I mean it.
uh,
Right. It's like you need
it's
the record to really go, and then if you're lucky, if you're working in like the mainstream market, especially here, records still do go to radio, but that's literally you being a part of the 1%, which
not
is the
even
whole
1%.
it's not even that, huh? It's like teeny tiny. Like the odds of it is so slim. And that's such crap. Like it's already hard enough to make it in the music business in the first place. But to put people in a position where they've done all of the work, they've navigated to get into the room, they've mastered their craft to get to the point where they're writing a hit record, and then for them to not even get to see the fruits of their labor as this song is like all over TikTok, all over Instagram, all over this, all over that. Like, I mean, it's such a crappy feeling?
Yeah, and this is why we've kind of focused a lot on the song fee
Yeah.
now, because we realize, with the per diems, as I said, it's still a very limited getting labels to pay it, and also this is only majors, and it's only majors who have booked that when they have booked the session.
Yeah.
With song fees, it's basically it's a transaction that allows for the first
Yeah.
mechanical
First use.
use. So yeah, which is the only time a songwriter has any power. The first release of a song. After that, we have no power. Anybody can cover our songs, but the first release, even though it is being highly abused at the moment with social media, but even with actual releases. I mean,
People
I've
are just
I've had
dropping
records.
stuff.
Yeah, I just found out that I had a record out last month, and this is not unusual. I know, in particular, in dance music, a lot of the times you get DJs kind of playing stuff out for like tens of thousands of people that without having any agreement with the songwriters of that track. just to try out tracks, and then it might post it on social media. It's a complete wild west at the moment. So we're trying to kind of reel this in and empower each other to actually exercise first use.
So how will this change and I'm talking per diems, how will this change the day-to-day reality for songwriters in the UK?
I think hopefully, and what we're kind of looking at is changing the discussion and the perception of songwriters, valuing songwriters' time. It's the first step in it. I think hopefully the per diem, which I've already seen, has become not a surprise when you spring it on people. And I do understand sometimes, and this is something that we discuss a lot in the Music Creator Collective group, is every situation is different. You might be working with a new artist that is not in a deal, but then you can do a small agreement saying, okay, when you do get your deal, you can reimburse me for these sessions, or very simple agreements like that. Or if they're self-releasing, you can give me a share of the master, which is actually quite easy these days, because a lot of the independent distributors even allow to split up the master rights so that it could go to more than one person. So I think it's changing the conversation. I think already we've seen with some of the record labels, when they book songwriting camps, they sometimes voluntarily say, and we'll pay per diems to all the writers.
That's awesome. So, do you think that this will set a global precedent? Like, do you think that other territories will start to get paid per diems as well? Like, how do you think this is going to impact the landscape?
Well, it's interesting. I know across Europe, this has been a discussion that has been going parallel to what we've been doing in the UK. So, in particular, in Germany and in Denmark, this has been something that they've been campaigning on over there and seen results on. I think, and I hope, I mean, I'm not as much across in the US, because there are so many things in the US, like healthcare, that healthcare is in most countries in Europe not an issue for creators because we have universal healthcare. So I know that in the US there are multiple issues, but I think that the per diem, points on the master, and song fees is a way to not sit and wait for legislation, but to act right away. I think points on the master is something that's already happening. I think sadly, so far, when it's happening, it comes out of the artist share. In the meantime, the label side is untouched, and we think that needs to change when it comes to that. And I think the song fee hopefully is something that we're looking at as a cost of doing business for the
Period.
label.
Period. I've done 4 deals for songs that I've written this year, and I've made $20,000 so far in songwriter fees this year. Out of all of the fees, by the way, the fee has been around 5 grand per song.
Which is great.
Yeah,
More than a lot of us here.
yeah, I mean, it's more than I mean, and obviously you already know me. You know, I'm like, I want $1 million. But honestly, if I had it my way, I would be getting my songwriter fee would be I would be getting paid $15,000 per song. That's what I want. 5,000 is the highest I've gotten so far. And it's the number that I will no longer go below, though. Like, where it's just like, if it's not 5 grand or more, I'm not doing it. The experience with negotiating song fees, depending on who you're negotiating with, is different. You know, like there's some people we had there's a song, like a K-pop song that I did, and an executive that actually knew me from when I did the song said to my manager, we sent our counter offer because they were like, oh, we have a fee. It was $1,000, something like that. And I was like, no, I want 5,000. And they're like, no one's ever going to pay you this. And we're like, maybe you're not going to pay me this, but like, I just got paid this 2 weeks ago from somebody else, you know? And it's definitely like, I've bumped up against, some producers who were like frustrated because they just want to be able to sell the song. And I'm like, if you sell this song and I don't get paid, I'm suing everyone. I'm gonna sue everyone, you know? And then there's other situations where I didn't get any pushback, where I was like, this is what I want. And they were like, okay, cool. And paid it, and there was no drama, which was nice.
I think it's really inspirational. It's so good that you tell people what you get paid. So because when people say, "Oh, I don't pay," or when labels say we don't pay song fees, and we already know. And this was actually when we started the Pay Songwriters thing, and we had all sitting on a call with managers of you know really big songwriters, medium songwriters, and one of the managers said, I went to this label and tried to get a song fee, and they said, we don't pay song fees. And another manager said, yes, they do. I just got paid, a song fee for my songwriter last year. And this is so important because then we can all go back. It's like I said, divide and conquer is how their method. And us having a WhatsApp group where we support each other and share stories and say, kind of, where it's basically the writers can share in the same way and say, no, actually, I know that they've paid me a fee before, or I put my foot down. And most songwriters, when they first start, it's really scary because the first response is, oh, we're not going to release a song.
I get frustrated with songwriters that are like seasoned veterans, people who are in the room. Like the people who I always fuss with about these kind of things are the people who have the leverage to put their foot down and don't, who are like, yeah, but, and it's like, if you don't do it, the person who's in demand, sometimes I can't even afford to say no. And I'm like, no, because it's the precedent. It's that's what matters. And it's not going to change all at once. It's going to change deal after deal after deal after deal. What's your advice for American songwriters who want to organize for the same thing?
In the UK, all these different organizations have come together as one group to campaign together. So you do the hard discussions behind the scenes and say, look, we need to support each other to get everyone together and have these discussions, whether it's on Zoom or whatever. I think it might not be as easy, but surely I can't imagine that we're such an outlier in the UK or even in mainland Europe that it can't be done. I mean, it's interesting because I think that even when it comes to featured artists, is there an organization that really represents them, or apart from the Recording
The
Academy?
Recording
But
Academy, I feel like that's it. The Recording Academy, I feel like is our like marquee org, but they are not an organization that is for music, like songwriters and composers. It's an organization that is for the recording of the song. But even like the NMPA, like I mean, I recently, I feel like I told you about this. Like I recently, I reached out to David Israelite about this subject and was just like, where does NMPA stand on songwriters getting paid from the label? Like, and it was a very unproductive, didn't really go anywhere conversation, right? And so it's like you have an org like that who represents us in the rate settings and, like all of that. But is also, like you said earlier, our major publishing companies are owned by the major music groups that own the record companies. And so it puts our publishers in a unrealistic seat because they can only go but so far before they've got the same boss, and so I wonder what this looks like here because like as an organizer it's been really challenging to get other organizations on board, other artists on board. Like I'm like, okay, who's our Ray? what organization is our Ivors? What politicians are our, like the way that the government got involved and got into and listened to you guys um on these issues is different than it is here. Like I remember even having a conversation when the Songwriter Caucus started to, launch back up. And they were only focused on AI. And I'm like, "Hey, like not saying that AI isn't a big deal. Yes. But also this too." And I was saying I was talking to the administration of one of the Congress people that was that's on the caucus, and I was like, how many songwriters are you guys actually going out and speaking to about what they want? Like y'all are a
Mhm.
songwriter caucus with no real relationship with the songwriting community and the people in the room who are suffering at the hand of all of this. A lot of the people who are organizers, even me, we're not in the room anymore. I'm not in the room chasing placements like I was before. My friends are still in the room chasing placements, and those are the people that need to be sitting up there in front of the CRB. Those are the people that need to be platformed and heard and all of the things. And so I just wonder what it looks like here. What would be
Uh,
your advice? What do you think we should do?
I don't think it needs to be legislation. And to be perfectly honest, this is not a legislation. This is not, the government realized they can't go in and dictate. It's a free market, so to speak. But what they can do is kind of put pressure on the parties getting in the same room and coming up with some sort of solution. What they would have is some sort of kind of stick, the carrot and the stick, to have a stick saying, if you don't come to some sort of solution, we might have to go in and regulate somehow.
So the government threatened regulation, right? Is that what happened? So because
Mm-hmm.
like it's interesting, right? It's like we have all this conversation about a free market, but here our copyrights are regulated by the government. We're already regulated. So I get really sick and tired of hearing any conversation about anything that is free market adjacent when it comes to us and how we move about our money. I don't want to hear a thing about price fixing. They fixed the price. It's 15%. It's fixed. It's fixed. And it's fixed for 5 years. And so I would like to see the US government give some energy to the nuance of that reality. They're in a free market. We are not, and
Well, funnily enough, in the rest of the world, we are supposedly in a free market, and yet we
you're
we
still
have
going through
very
this.
similar. Yeah,
Was there a moment that you thought this wouldn't happen? And if so, what kept you going?
I have never ever thought it wouldn't happen
Mm,
ever. It
that's beautiful.
will, whether it happens this way through the fixed streaming campaign, whether it happens through Pay Songwriters, whether it happens through Music Creators Collective, it will happen. You just have to kind of think, it's like you have to be like water. If there's an obstacle, you have to kind of flow around it.
That's beautiful. You have to be like water, go all around it. Okay, so last question. Now that per diems have been won, what's next?
Points on the master and song fees.
Oh,
So yeah. And I think what we're really, really pushing for is to actually the acknowledgement of first use refusal or first use, but for songwriters to um, uh, enact and enforce their rights. But also, one of the parts of it is if a label puts up a record or distributes a record without having first use, that actually you can either, I mean, the real kind of uh, the turbocharged solution is to have it taken down. But you can also put in a dispute with your CMO and say that this is, I have not agreed to this. I think it's just it's for it to be in the discussion for most, because I think most songwriters don't even know that they have this right. So I think this is something that we need to really bring home with songwriters, that they do have, A label cannot release a song without your approval, period.
Is there anything else, any other message that you want to send to songwriters, especially songwriters in the US, around this subject?
With any session, always, bring up, I mean, we've even, done a template for what you can have as a sign off in your email when you're booking for a songwriting session, just to kind of, because sometimes a label or an artist might say, oh, well, if we would have known from the start, we would have put some of the budget aside for this. So if you just have, a sign up that says, I won't grant first use mechanical until we've had a discussion and agreement on per diem, if that's the kind of session it is. Otherwise, points on the master and a song fee. So it is already in the conversation, because I believe, like with producers, we just need to move the goalpost and make it the new industry standard that these are discussions that are being had on a regular basis. And I know there are some management of producers that have this as a sign up where they say, if there is a social media post with the music in it, we see that as that triggers the production fee to be paid and the points. So something
You're treating
similar
it like
for
a release.
songwriters. Yeah, exactly.
Nice.
So I think and it's a way of not making it too kind of like confrontational from the start, but just kind of having it in the conversation that we are gonna have this discussion before release, if it gets released. And a per diem, to always ask for a per diem if you're asked to do a session.
Period. I appreciate you so much.
I
I
appreciate
appreciate you
you,
so much.
Tiffany. You are such an inspiration. You really are. You
Oh,
really
so are
are.
you.
Never
So,
stop doing what you're doing.
girl, pray for me. Pray for me. Pray for me.